I'm an at-large member of the council, so I represent the whole city, and I'm one of, there are 5 at-large council members. I'm one of 5 who represent you, as well as your ward member. I also chair the council's Committee on Judiciary, which handles all public safety issues, as well as has oversight over MPD and all the criminal justice agencies that are within the district government, and we also are responsible for authoring any changes to the criminal laws in the district. I do want to speak real briefly to some of the security issues that are mentioned at the bottom of the agenda, and I'll just take them in order. Loitering is one of the more difficult issues that we deal with as a council, because the Supreme Court has made it clear over and over again that people have a right to stand around if they want to in this country, to loiter if they want to. They don't have a right to stand around and threaten people or stand around and commit crimes. And so it's at the point that the standing around becomes a criminal act that the police can act. We're asked over and over again if we can't change the law to prohibit people from standing around, and it's a very, very difficult issue. We have looked at some different strategies, like for instance, making it illegal to stand around a liquor store. If it's within a very discrete area, let's say 25 feet of a liquor store, we can enact that sort of prohibition. But loitering in general, we cannot prohibit. We do have several statutes that we have authored over the last decade or so that do kind of address loitering. One of them is what's called a drug-free zone, that if there's an area where there has been continuously, it's not a drug-free zone, is an enhancement. What is it called? We have prostitution-free zones, and is it drug-free zone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't.
The commander says don't use them anymore. Chief, you were going to say.
Right, yeah. Right now, the drug-free zones are in the prostitution-free zones. They're under review by the Office of Attorney General, so we have not instituted them lately. However, there are those drug-free zones that are established around recreation centers, schools, where by law,
but it's an enhanced penalty.
Yeah, it's an enhanced penalty. Just where if you are caught selling drugs, it is an enhanced penalty. The U.S. Attorney's Office is here as well. But the loitering, the safe zones have been put on hold because they have been challenged for the constitutional rights at this time.
Okay, yeah, we had a hearing on prostitution-free zones. That must be what caused that review, because we had a hearing a couple months ago on legislation that would take the prostitution-free zones and make them permanent, and that then brought in some testimony that questioned the constitutionality of the zone as established, which is limited in duration. There has to have been a history of criminal activity within the zone. It has to be very clearly defined, and as I said, limited in duration. We had written the law to expand it to, I believe, 20 days. And then within that period of time, if the police warned somebody that they had to move on and they continued to be in the area, then they could be arrested. You can see how that does infringe with civil liberties and gets right up against the constitutional standard, which is that people have a right under the United States Constitution to loiter. So it's very difficult to deal with loitering, the loitering issue. Prostitution is on this list. I was going to say we have these prostitution-free zones, which I authored in the Criminal Code Amendments Act a couple of years ago, but apparently as a result of this hearing, that's not being looked at as well, and in terms of how it can be implemented, if at all. The trespassing is on the list. We've modified the law with regard to what's called unlawful entry to make it a little bit easier for not only the police to arrest, but for the prosecutors to prosecute unlawful entry. What we've tried to do, and my approach toward the criminal code has been that I'm always open to hearing suggestions of where we could change the law. We work closely with the U.S. Attorney's Office as well as the D.C. Attorney General's Office with regard to any suggestions. We don't always agree with what suggestions are put forward, sometimes because there is a civil liberty issue, such as I just mentioned with regard to loitering, but we're open to looking at where we can try some new strategies in the law that would make it easier for police to maintain order and for prosecutors to be able to prosecute successfully. The other issue that's on here is robberies, and I think you all know that there's been quite a bit in the news over the last several months about the increase in robberies in the district. In fact, since that news, which was more like in February, maybe March, robberies have gone down relative to the increase we've been seeing and also relative to last year. So if you compare year-to-date right now with year-to-date a year ago, robberies are still up slightly, but I mean, back in February, I think it was like something like a 50% increase compared to the previous year, and now it's closer to something like 10% this year compared to last year. So it shows that there's been a difference. And that's a couple of reasons. One, the police have worked hard to redeploy officers and to target robbery. Robbery is one of the most difficult crimes to police. You know, there's some crimes like, and I'll pick the worst, which is murder. Murder often occurs between people who are at least acquaintances, if not friends. It's a little hard to believe, but murder often occurs that way. And they're witnesses. But with robbery, it's typically a stranger crime, so the victim can't begin to say who it was. And of course, if there's a gun involved or threat of a gun, the victim isn't busy, you know, just let me pause for a moment while I get your identifying characteristics. It happens too quick, and that's not possible. So it's very difficult. And then also the robber is often disguised. Very difficult crime to solve. The police have put more resources into it, which is one reason why the number of robberies has gone down. And also, I think you're aware, because it's been in the news, there's been some attention to trying to deactivate phones. And while that hasn't happened immediately, that is in the works. The Federal Communications Commission, which unfortunately regulates these things, I say unfortunately because, you know, sometimes a local solution would happen quicker, but the Federal Communications Commission has finally said to the carriers, you've got to deactivate these phones. And that doesn't just mean that when my phone is stolen and I call and report it stolen, that they turn it off, but rather that they deactivate the phone so that you replace the SIMS card in it and get another number to it, and then the robber who actually has fenced it is able to sell that phone. Well, now it will have no value, none, zero. And if it has no value, then there's really no reason to steal it. So we should see that there will be a decrease in the number of thefts of BlackBerry cell phones and so forth. I mean, it's really hard to imagine. I mean, you've all seen where somebody's walking down the street reading their BlackBerry. I mean, they might as well just walk down the street with their wallet out in their hand like this. And even though the victim should not be a victim, and even though we are all well-intended, I do it as well, you know, be looking, it really makes it very easy to steal the phone, which is robbery. So there's progress that's been made on that front. But again, I'm really here to hear what concerns there are and to listen to suggestions and see if there's some more changes we could look at in terms of the criminal code. Thank you.